the profound impact that technological progress has had on the life experiences across various generations and on societal development. Twenge suggests that technological progress is the driving force behind the observed differences between various age groups. Technological progress shapes our lifestyle, which in turn influences our beliefs, behaviors, and personal traits. Technological advancements progress in a straight line, consistently advancing toward enhanced simplicity, convenience, and enjoyment, resulting in permanent transformations in daily living. Technological progress is the main driver of generational change as it alters daily life and societal standards. The author meticulously traces how technology's relentless progress has reshaped the very fabric of American life, influencing every generation since the silence. The shift in understanding how generations evolve arises from the acknowledgement that the impact of technology goes beyond influencing significant world events like World War II or 9/11. It deeply transforms the everyday experiences of individuals. Individuals who came into the world during a similar period and underwent comparable experiences internalize these changes, thus shaping their distinct perspective on the world. The arrival of television transformed the professional and leisure pursuits of both baby boomers and Generation X. The boomer generation experienced television as a novel facet of their childhood. Their childhood and teenage years were shaped by a shared popular culture, defined by the few choices offered by the three, later four, major broadcast television networks, in a time before the widespread presence of cable television and VCRs. Do you remember watching iconic TV programs like Land of the Lost, HR Puffnstuff, or Schoolhouse Rock? Should this be the case, you probably belong to the baby boomer or Generation X demographic groups. During this period, individuals who came of age during the demographic surge following the Second World War were instrumental in developing and shaping programs for younger viewers, leading to productions that reflected the 1960s distinctive ethos of individualism, eccentric imagery, and often capricious adventures that the more conservative network executives of earlier eras would probably have dismissed. Imagine it as Sesame Street, with an injection of psychedelic flair. Twenge suggests that the content of television reflected the boomers' struggles as they tried to balance their inclination for rebellion with the responsibilities that came with adulthood, often leading to a tumultuous atmosphere for the following generation. She references popular television shows like Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, and The Brady Bunch, to underscore her argument, where the characters face milder versions of the typical adult challenges that were common during the eras of the silent and boomer generations, such as rising divorce rates, declining respect for authority, and drug use. These unconventional television programs offered Generation X children comfort and an escape, reflecting their life experiences during a time marked by the breakdown of traditional societal standards and the rise of new ones. Television exposed boomers and Gen X-ers to a range of products of which they had not previously realized the absence. The practice of targeting children with advertisements significantly gained momentum during the boomer generation, and has since been a persistent approach across later generations, continuously promoting the belief that genuine happiness comes from owning material goods and improving one's looks. Television commercials incessantly displaying an array of items, from confectionaries to clothing to automobiles, shaped the materialistic outlook of Generation X, as they compared their existence to the lavish lifestyles depicted in TV shows featuring the affluence of the rich. Millennials, who are inherently familiar with technology, have grown up amidst the emergence of instant messaging and the early stages of social media. Millennials have been intricately connected with the digital world of the Internet from a young age. By the year 2000, most people had gained access to the Internet within their own homes, even though it wasn't until the mid-1990s that the World Wide Web became commercialized. The generation that came of age with the advent of online communication, often known as Millennials, pioneered the use of digital platforms for interaction, especially from their early years to late adolescence, through services such as AIM, spearheaded the practice of downloading music files which unsettled the music business, and were early explorers of nascent social networking sites that laid the groundwork for the rise of Facebook. Millennials' ease with technology, which was shaped by their experiences, positioned them as the inherent denizens of a digital landscape that is constantly changing, a concept that often proves difficult to grasp for those who were born during the silent and boomer eras. Generation Z has come of age in an era marked by the widespread presence of smartphones and continuous interaction on the internet. The iPhone was first released in 2007, at a time when most of the older members of Generation Z were enrolled in middle or junior high school, and many were still in elementary school. In 2012, smartphones were owned by half of the American population, with a substantial proportion being adolescents. The manner in which individuals communicate, learn, and conduct their daily activities has been utterly revolutionized by smartphones and their associated social media platforms. Individuals are increasingly using apps to interact socially, with platforms such as Snapchat and Instagram being prominent examples, and they favor texting for short conversations. Prior to the widespread use of touchscreens, Generation Z individuals had become adept at sending text messages using the more challenging flip phones. Once a solitary pastime enjoyed on platforms such as Atari and Nintendo, gaming evolved into a highly social experience, with the advent of online connectivity leading to the development of expansive virtual realms inhabited by millions. Generational differences are evident in how they adapt to shifts in social interaction and communication due to technological progress. Every new generation alters the methods of our communication. Individuals from the silent and baby boomer generations frequently conversed directly in person or through phone calls, and it was a usual custom to drop by for visits without any advance warning. Societal norms evolved noticeably during the 1990s and 2000s when email, followed by texting and social media, revolutionized the ways in which people communicate, resulting in distinct intergenerational differences in interaction. Individuals from the baby boomer and Generation X cohorts, who have traditionally relied on analog methods of communication, are now adapting to digital practices. Members of Generation X adapted to the incorporation of email into their professional lives with the advancement of technology and communication, yet they maintained a preference for in-person or telephonic interactions when discussing more personal matters. Today, it's not unusual for a family member from the boomer generation to avoid texting or social media, preferring phone calls and sometimes visiting relatives without prior notice, seeking to share moments and create memories alongside their offspring. Millennials have gained recognition for their extensive engagement with early social media platforms and habitual texting. Millennials, who matured during a time when the traditional norms of the 1950s and 1960s were no longer prevalent, became trailblazers in incorporating texting and the early versions of social media into their everyday lives. Millennials often opt for text messaging for quick conversations and regularly engage with their peers, organize events, keep up with political developments, and rally for various social and political movements through the use of social platforms. The preference of Generation Z for digital interaction has consequences for their in-person relationships. According to Twenge, Gen Z prefers communicating online even with friends they see in person every day at school. In her argument, Twenge asserts that no other group in American history has experienced the level of solitude that Generation Z has, due to their preference for digital communication over in-person interactions. The phrase, ghosting, describes the sudden halt in communication with an individual, a behavior commonly linked to Generation Z that reflects the dominant trend of discretion and dominance in digital exchanges. Technological progress has significantly altered the way families interact and how children are raised. Twenge also argues that the dynamics within families have been significantly transformed by advancements in technology. The introduction of household appliances like washing machines and refrigerators transformed daily tasks from collective duties to individual activities, which in turn opened up new job opportunities for women and led to an increase in the number of mothers who work. The other, much more recent impact is on child rearing. The digital world is not a safe place for kids and teens, so younger generations have been carefully supervised and protected in both the real world and the virtual one. The method that underscores a more leisurely lifestyle has transformed real-life experiences and expectations about how children spend their time, resulting in diminished independence for use across various age groups and a decrease in unstructured activities. During the baby boomer era, it became common for children to come back to homes without parental supervision after school, a trend that emerged alongside a rise in the workforce participation of mothers. Twenge challenges the common perception that the first generation, predominantly nurtured by working mothers, was Generation X. Her examination of formal job statistics indicates that the employment rates of married mothers have consistently risen, particularly spiking at a time when most children of school age were part of the baby boomer generation. Many children born to the boomer generation often came home from school to empty houses, because there were no adults present to oversee their activities after classes. Why do we persist in maintaining the conviction that these trends are unique to Generation X? Twenge suggests that the change might be linked to what mothers did after work, while boomers often had fewer options for childcare, leading to more time without supervision. Millennials tended to be enrolled in organized after-school activities overseen by adults. As the silent and boomer generations saw more mothers entering the workforce, societal expectations lagged behind, leading to a higher proportion of boomer generation children becoming more self-reliant. The emergence of the millennial generation signified a change that enabled a greater number of parents within this group to arrange for their children's upbringing. The emergence of children returning to empty homes after school, commonly known as latchkey children, was a result of not only an increase in the number of mothers entering the workforce, but also a broader societal recognition of this change. Millennials were raised with a level of parental oversight that was unparalleled, which transformed the conventional anticipations associated with maturation. Millennials, primarily born to the baby boomer generation, are acknowledged as the generation that was the most purposefully planned for and eagerly anticipated in the history of the United States, raised in a context that emphasized the importance of child rearing and development. Parents grew more convinced of the necessity to invest more time in their children and to include them in structured events and programs. Gen Twenge describes the rise in overly cautious child rearing practices as helicopter parenting, linking its appearance to worries about physical safety stemming from ongoing risks to children and the growing dangers in the digital world, which align with the coming of age and early adult years of the millennial generation. Helicopter parenting also involved a noticeable amount of what Twenge calls overpraise, which included frequent affirmations regarding the intelligence, uniqueness, and skillfulness of children, originating from the dominant cultural emphasis on nurturing a positive self-perception, deemed crucial for future achievements. Parents started scheduling their children's time with structured events, frequently transporting them to different venues for these occurrences. The rise in individualism, coupled with the time-saving benefits of technology in daily activities, concerns about child safety, and the competitive environment, also played a role in this shift due to the heightened focus on acquiring undergraduate degrees. Generation Z experiences an extended period of youth and teenage years as a result of increased parental involvement and the widespread influence of technology. Gen Z continued the pattern of slow and safeguarded maturation, initially observed in millennials, by postponing traditional adult obligations such as joining the job market, starting romantic relationships, getting their driving permits, partaking in alcoholic beverages, and engaging in sexual encounters. Twenge notes that today's 18-year-olds often exhibit characteristics more akin to those of 14-year-olds from previous generations, suggesting a broader delay in taking on adult responsibilities. Members of Generation Z often delay entering into matrimony and beginning their family lives. Part of this stems from a cultural change toward more supervision of teens, a trend that began with Millennials and continued into Gen Z, Gen X-ers, who enjoyed unsupervised childhoods in the parents who matured in the 1970s and 1980s tended to restrict their children's local roaming and socializing with peers, indicating a departure from the traditions of their predecessors. For younger generations, engaging in social media and gaming is essential for their social engagement, which often leads to disagreements regarding the use of mobile devices. Other perspectives. While technological progress is a significant factor in generational change, it is not the only driver. Economic, political, and cultural factors also play crucial roles in shaping generational identities and experiences. The impact of television on baby boomers and Generation X might be overstated, as other cultural and societal changes also influence these generations. Not all millennials were equally engaged with early social media or had equal access to technology, which suggests a more nuanced view of their relationship with digital communication. The assertion that Generation Z prefers digital interaction to the detriment of in-person relationships may overlook the complexity of social interactions today, where digital and physical realms are often intertwined. The idea that baby boomers and Generation X are merely adapting to digital communication practices might ignore the contributions and innovations members of these generations have made to the digital world. The portrayal of millennials' engagement with social media and texting could be seen as a simplification that doesn't account for the diversity within the generation regarding technology use and preferences. The concept of helicopter parenting and its attributed effects on millennials might not fully capture the range of parenting styles and their outcomes within the generation. The extended period of youth experienced by Generation Z could be influenced by broader societal and economic trends, such as increased educational demands and economic uncertainty, rather than solely by parental involvement and technology. The narrative of children returning to empty homes during the baby boomer era may not reflect the experiences of all children from that generation, as family dynamics and child care arrangements varied widely. The suggestion that technology has led to a decrease in unstructured activities for children might not consider the ways in which technology can also facilitate new forms of creativity and independent play. New section: the escalation of self-reliance and its influence on the perspectives, actions, and life paths of various generations. Twenge highlights the escalating focus on independence and individual goals, a trend that became more pronounced when the baby boomers began to embrace values that set them apart from earlier generations starting in the 1960s. Each generation has developed its own approach to independence, characterized by an emphasis on personal choice, a promotion of self-expression, or championing the causes of groups that have been historically overlooked. There have been considerable changes that have altered individual behavior, transformed their values, and reimagined what they consider a satisfying life. The author notes that the expansion of a culture that prioritizes individualism has not only enhanced freedoms, particularly for women and those who identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, but has also fostered increased sensations of skepticism and instability. Personal priorities have become increasingly emphasized as individualism has evolved from a position that once contested conventional norms. Twenge's research scrutinizes changes in language usage by studying a mirrored reflection of broader changes in viewpoints and behaviors within the extensive Google Books database. She noted that starting in the 1970s, there was an increased focus on self-awareness, as shown by the more frequent use of terms like identity and unique. The shift in social standards began during the 1960s, characterized by a strong emphasis on individual freedom, and continued to evolve with the introduction of birth control and appliances that lessened the burden of household chores, thus enabling women to gain economic independence and devote more energy to activities outside the traditional roles of marriage and child-rearing. The baby boomers set out on a quest for personal enlightenment, questioning the traditional norms of their era. The generation of baby boomers placed a strong emphasis on individual liberty and the expression of oneself, marking a departure from the communal standards upheld by the preceding silent generation and the greatest generation. For instance, young men born after the Second World War opted for lengthier hairstyles, moving away from the traditionally short haircuts of the 1950s and 1960s, symbolizing a subtle but meaningful act of rebellion that highlighted the growing gap between generations. The generation born post-World War II questioned the necessity of mandatory enlistment in the armed forces, resulting in a transition to an all-volunteer military, indicative of their wider doubt of what used to be deemed immutable social standards. The boomers rejected the notion that sexual activity should be saved for the post-marital phase of life, contributing to the surge of the free love mindset and propelling the sexual revolution that characterized the late 1960s and the 1970s, with "do your own thing" becoming a prevalent slogan within this demographic. During the 1970s, the focus turned to a pursuit of self-discovery and fulfilling personal desires, a process often characterized by a profound and occasionally spiritual quest that involved delving into self-improvement books, participating in spiritual getaways, and undertaking extensive introspection. Members of Generation X display a strong inclination towards individuality and possess a well-developed sense of confidence. Generation X came of age in a society influenced by the silent and boomer generations, which emphasized the importance of independence and equality. Generation X viewed the existing circumstances as the norm. As they transitioned to their adult years, Generation X teenagers naturally developed their unique identities, not influenced by the idealism of the baby boomers, but through a perspective grounded in pragmatism and sensibility. They inherently understood their distinctiveness, without requiring seminars to raise awareness, or the concept of uninhibited romantic encounters. Gen X-ers, potentially shaped by their individualistic cultural background, showed a significant rise in confidence and belief in their own abilities, reflecting a more positive self-view compared to the self-perception of the boomer generation at a similar stage in their existence. Millennials highly regard authenticity and possess a robust sense of self-assurance. Millennials continue to nurture a societal trend that prioritizes their unique personal and professional aspirations. Millennials are convinced that having faith in their own abilities is crucial for attaining success. Millennials were raised with a pronounced awareness of their uniqueness and significance, a concept that was nurtured by older generations, leading them to highly value authenticity and to champion the open expression of their genuine and unique selves, embracing flaws and all. When millennials began to enter colleges and workplaces with the dawn of the new millennium, they carried a distinct confidence and a craving for acknowledgement, which frequently surprised their educators and bosses, those who, paradoxically, did not recognize that these youths had consistently been lauded for their uniqueness throughout their formative years. Individuals from Generation Z place a strong emphasis on the significance of independence in matters of gender identity and how it is expressed. The ethos of UBU has evolved with Generation Z, who take the self-focused attitudes seen in boomers, Gen X-ers, and millennials to a new level, exemplified by the freedom to select one's gender. Individuals belonging to Generation Z typically embrace the idea that gender identity can be non-binary, and may not align with the biological sex assigned at birth, marking a shift from conventional beliefs that directly associate masculinity and femininity with biological sex. The once rigidly defined limits and norms linked to gender roles have become more ambiguous, allowing for a broader range of self-identification options that go beyond the traditional male and female categories. The perspectives of various generations on marriage, family, and personal satisfaction have been shaped by individualism. The traditional sequence of finishing high school, marrying in one's 20s, and promptly starting a family began to unravel as the pursuit of autonomy grew increasingly common. The milestones marking the progression into adolescence and adulthood are now being achieved at a notably later stage compared to previous times. The drive for individual independence, along with the critical examination of social conventions and traditions that were once accepted without challenge, is propelling these transformations. While this is the case, the prolonged phase of work and study that succeeds high school doesn't consistently lead to beneficial results. For the millennial generation, this period is frequently characterized by stress, apprehension, and doubt instead of excitement, independence, and discovery. Boomers adjusting to the rise in divorces and the changing dynamics between genders. Twenge provides a thorough analysis of how attitudes and behaviors regarding marriage and divorce have evolved among various generations. In the mid to late 1960s, as the first members of the baby boom generation began to marry, there was an increase in divorce rates, marking a significant shift from the stable, marriage-centric 1950s. The increase in divorce rates initiated with the silent generation and continued to escalate as the boomers aged. They frequently chose to dissolve unsatisfactory unions, a decision that diverged from their mothers' tendencies, who were often influenced by the early marriage customs akin to the silent generation, and by their strong advocacy for women's liberation. The evolving nature of family structures, particularly in terms of the anticipated duties and positions of women, posed a significant obstacle for the baby boomer generation. As the workforce experienced an increase in the number of working women, couples belonging to the generation of baby boomers faced novel difficulties in juggling the duties associated with child-rearing. Numerous families with roots in the boomer generation found themselves in a challenging situation due to the lack of affordable childcare and the prevailing societal expectation that child-rearing is primarily a woman's responsibility, which intensified stress and tension in marriages. Generation X individuals have delayed entering into matrimony and observed a growing trend where parenting is becoming distinct from marital unions. Members of Generation X have reshaped the norms of early adulthood by delaying the act of marriage longer than their predecessors did throughout the 20th century. In the 1990s, the United States witnessed a notable shift when the average age at which women had their first child dropped below the age often linked with entering into marriage, indicating a departure from the earlier generation's tendency to delay starting a family. Twenge links this pattern to an increase in adolescent pregnancies in the late 1980s and early 1990s, a time characterized by instability and uncertainty that had a significant impact on many young people from Generation X while they were dealing with the consequences of individualism in their familial environments. Following the era of the baby boomers, there was a noticeable shift in attitudes, with people showing a lesser inclination to become parents in their teens, a perspective that evolved over time and resulted in the postponement of family formation, motivated by the pursuit of individual fulfillment instead of adherence to societal expectations. Many women from Generation X are reigniting enthusiasm for bigger families by opting to have 3 or more children, and are also delaying the beginning of their family life until reaching their late 20s or early 30s. Millennials are delaying or foregoing marriage and parenthood in order to concentrate on their personal ambitions. Millennials continued the trend of delaying marriage, which led to an increase in the average age at first marriage to 28 for women and 31 for men, higher than the averages for any previous generation in the United States. They were also delaying or completely avoiding starting families, leading to a noticeable drop in birth rates after a period of increase linked to the older members of Generation X. Gen M. Twenge posits that the focus on self-reliance within the millennial generation, fostered during a period where they received constant affirmation that prioritizing their personal needs was the key to success, has been a defining characteristic. Generation Z's pragmatic view on relationships might result in a decline in the number of marriages. Generation Z's doubt about the essential role of marriage, or long-term partnerships, could be a result of observing the unstable marital and parental behaviors of their forebears. Individualism's impact on personal values, materialism, and the pursuit of success. Individualism has profoundly transformed the way individuals prioritize and strategize in their lives. Twenge draws a distinction between these values, which psychologists classify as intrinsic, and those referred to as extrinsic, observing that values like aiding others, or the pursuit of life's purpose, are associated with greater happiness and improved mental well-being. Prioritizing external objectives like wealth, celebrity status, or a favorable reputation is associated with increased dissatisfaction and a higher incidence of psychological problems. The focus of the baby boomer cohort transitioned from values steeped in idealism to an emphasis on materialism. Twenge observes that the generation known as boomers, once regarded as idealists who rejected the pursuit of material wealth in the 1960s, gradually adopted materialistic values as they grew older, especially in the 1980s, and became influential figures in the business sector while also prioritizing their family obligations. The era also reflected the widespread interest in the luxurious lifestyles of celebrities and the affluent. Individuals from Generation X highly prioritize external achievements, such as financial success and societal standing. Generation X rejected the idea that focusing on material wealth, possessions, or social status represented a shift away from traditional values. Members of Generation X tirelessly sought these goals, perceiving the amassing of wealth and the attainment of a comfortable way of life as favorable results, indicative of the self-reliant values that honor each individual's freedom to create their own future, and acknowledge that their chosen path is just as legitimate as any other. Owning luxury clothing and vacation properties was considered permissible should one's path naturally lead there. Twenge observes that during the late 1980s, when Generation X individuals were in their teenage years and early adulthood, there was a pronounced emphasis on materialistic values, coinciding with a period where the wealth gap was widening, making the disparity between affluent and impoverished individuals more apparent. Millennials recognized the importance of aligning their ambitious goals with the realities of their economic situation. The millennial generation matured during an era marked by the rapid expansion of internet access and a time frequently linked with broad economic well-being, which fostered an environment where aspirations, in terms of career and personal life, were heightened, suggesting that a satisfying existence necessitated reaching a specific level of success. In 2008, as the economy took a nosedive, it triggered a significant downturn in the housing market and resulted in widespread unemployment and a scarcity of job prospects, which happened at the same time a large number of millennials were completing their higher education. Twenge posits that a considerable portion of the millennial generation faced the stark limits of their ambitions during the economic slump, realizing that their income was below what they had hoped for, and that reaching the adult way of life they desired proved to be far tougher than anticipated, which led to a sense of disillusionment and bitterness toward preceding generations. Millennials, contrary to their own beliefs, were in a better financial position than they realized, yet this did not alter their economic perceptions. Individuals from Generation Z exhibit a more practical method in their pursuit of material prosperity. Generation Z exhibits a more prudent attitude towards employment, economic matters, and the importance of possessions, influenced by their formative years during times of economic and political instability, distinguishing them from previous generations. They seem to be gradually adjusting their goals for what lies ahead in order to achieve a better balance between work responsibilities and personal life. The political convictions of various generations have undergone significant changes, while institutions have been reshaped and the intensity of activism has fluctuated. Twenge observes that not only are Americans increasingly divided in their political beliefs, but that the divides often fall along generational lines. The worldviews of younger generations tend to be more forward-thinking than those of their elders, shaped by the distinctive events and circumstances they experience during their formative adult years. Her analysis of the heightened political involvement of Generation Z, the emphasis millennials place on equality and rights, and the widening gap between political factions demonstrates the possible influence on America's future political landscape. Generation Z has experienced a political awakening. The increased political involvement of Generation Z, characterized by a rise in activism and greater participation in elections, is a result of the major political, economic, cultural, and societal changes they experienced during their developmental years. Compared to earlier generations, there is a higher level of participation in voting and political activism. Analysts have observed a significant rise in political involvement among teens and young adults of Generation Z, marking a distinct shift from the already politically engaged millennial generation. Generation Z is not only engaged in the electoral process, but also demonstrates a significant commitment to activism. Members of Generation Z, despite harboring doubts about the country and its governance, steadfastly champion the changes they deem essential. The viability of democratic institutions and the role governmental bodies play is a subject of concern. Although there are currently only a few elected officials from Generation Z, Twenge expects their numbers to grow as the group ages. As individuals from Generation Z approach the age where they can participate in governance, typically in their 40s or later, they are anticipated to bring a unique outlook to the American political landscape, shaped by their distrust in authority figures and their belief that substantial changes are needed in the structure of government. The evolving political landscape of a polarized America. Twenge observes that while Americans have always had a range of opinions on policy matters, the intensity of these disputes has increased lately, leading to a rise in hostility and suspicion regarding the beliefs, goals, and intentions of the opposing political party. This environment has cultivated conditions under which uncompromising political figures rise to power, accompanied by strong calls for change, which could result in increased political discord and the possibility of major upheavals in the coming years. Boomers' political transition from a democratic orientation with liberal views to a conservative perspective aligned with the Republican Party. The Boomer generation, which came of age in the 1970s and initially had a strong inclination toward liberal Democrats, has undergone a significant change in political loyalty, with the majority now aligning with conservative Republicans. The change in political allegiance that is unparalleled in the political history of the United States. The Boomer generation's political path has been influenced by a mix of changes associated with aging, where individuals tend to adopt more conservative perspectives as they become satisfied with the status quo, and by the unique events that characterize their time. They were the first cohort to encounter an economic decline after the United States' longest period of economic growth, which coincided with many boomers settling down and moving into midlife. Generation X's persistent inclination to support the Republican Party stands in contrast to the favored political affiliations of the younger cohorts. The rise of conservative ideologies and the Republican Party's dominance significantly influenced the political environment as Generation X reached maturity. Generation X tends to favor the Republican Party more than other generational groups do. Individuals from more recent generations tend to favor progressive political beliefs. Compared to boomers at a similar stage in life, younger generations, such as Millennials and Gen Z-ers, show a stronger inclination towards progressive ideologies and frequently align themselves with the Democratic Party. Twenge notes that the key influences shaping these differences include societal acceptance of same-sex partnerships and the easing of restrictions on marijuana use. Younger generations continue to advocate for increased backing for public education and environmental conservation, building upon the groundwork laid by those who came before them. The increasing divide between citizens with liberal inclinations and political leaders, most of whom belong to the baby boomer generation. The political divide of the 2020s has widened, marked by a disparity between a group of older, more traditionally-minded politicians, a significant number of whom belong to the baby boomer generation, and a varied younger demographic that tends toward progressive ideals, which includes individuals from both the millennial generation and those born into Generation Z. The expanding divide in the convictions of the electorate compared to those of their representatives heightens the potential for escalated political unrest, especially when this is coupled with an escalating skepticism towards political processes and a waning reverence for authority figures. Perceptions of racial matters and the quest for social equity differ among various age cohorts. In recent times, the significance of issues related to race has increased as concerns about violence committed by police against Black and brown communities have escalated, with young people being particularly impacted. Younger white liberals have shifted their focus more toward issues of racial disparity, marking a notable change in their perspective that was previously less evident. The term, Great Awakening, denotes the period from the 2010s to the early 2020s, marked by a notable transformation in the viewpoints across different generational cohorts. Generation X is confronted with the intensification of identity politics and an increase in racial tensions. Generation X represents the last group to reach adulthood before the end of legally mandated racial segregation, witnessing the tail end of previous societal standards. Despite not having a completely segregated educational background, they have vivid memories of major media events like the Rodney King beating and the O.J. Simpson trial, which were followed by widespread discussions about how race could influence a person's prospects within the nation. Millennials are at the forefront of advocating for movements such as Black Lives Matter. The establishment of the Black Lives Matter movement exemplifies the dedication of the millennial generation to the principles of social justice, having been founded by 3 women from this age group. Members of Generation X also advocated for racial issues, yet they frequently found themselves in disagreement with the preceding silent and baby boomer generations. For millennials, however, the fight for social justice, often fueled by videos of police shootings on social media, was embraced by many of their liberal and especially white liberal boomer parents, creating a new generation of activists. Gen Z's racial consciousness and the expectation for institutional change. Generation Z came of age during a time marked by intense political discourse on systemic racism and protests advocating for racial justice, along with a strong dedication to fostering a society that emphasizes diversity, ensures fair treatment, and promotes equal opportunities. Institutions should naturally evolve to become more inclusive of different races, a concept that prompted them to challenge standards previously accepted or overlooked by their predecessors. The potential impact that changing attitudes and behaviors across various generations may have on employment, economic trends, family dynamics, and broader social movements. In the concluding section of her research, Twenge examines the potential consequences that these patterns of generational behavior may have, particularly in relation to work, economic circumstances, the growing sense of isolation, and the challenges in building understanding between various age demographics. The transformation of work environments to favor flexibility and support arrangements for working remotely. The health crisis accelerated several developing trends in employment, such as an increased focus on psychological health and the transition to working from remote locations. The conventional function of the workplace has undergone a transformation due to the rise of telecommuting. During the pandemic, employees and managers belonging to younger and middle-aged cohorts discovered that remote work not only simplified their lives, but also increased flexibility and improved the equilibrium between work and personal life. As these cohorts rise to power, there is an increased likelihood that numerous institutions will institutionalize remote work practices, supported by progress in technological fields. The influence of Generation Z on the modification of corporate policies to accommodate more adaptable work environments. Individuals belonging to Generation Z typically view remote work and flexible scheduling as commonplace expectations for most job positions, seeing employment as a series of contractual obligations rather than an expression of personal identity or community connection. Many individuals find the conventional workplace challenging, favoring an approach that is more cooperative or less centralized, which downplays the importance of a strict hierarchy. Companies must adjust to the cautious nature and lower confidence typical of Generation Z, which contrasts sharply with the traits associated with millennials. Addressing the challenges of a workforce that includes diverse age groups, all possessing distinct work ethics and values, is a considerable task. In the future, those in managerial positions will need to skillfully navigate the complexities of supervising a varied workforce that includes seasoned experts, as well as newcomers from the Generation Z period, thereby increasing the intricacy of interactions within the workplace and obliging leaders to reconcile the different degrees of digital proficiency, favored communication methods, and professional aspirations that are present among the diverse age groups of staff members. The number of births decreased concurrently with shifts in the economic landscape. Since 2007, there has been a significant shift in the United States demographic landscape, marked by a notable reduction in birth rates compared to past trends. The demand for products targeting children and adolescents has markedly decreased, a trend that is accompanied by a drop in the number of students in elementary and high schools, which is anticipated to affect higher education institutions, especially small liberal arts colleges that depend on the enrollment of traditional college-aged students. Interest in goods and offerings aimed at the younger demographic has diminished. Businesses catering to family needs have observed a decline in demand for children's toys, clothing, and furniture. The expected decrease in the number of teenagers during the 2030s might prompt a change in the traditional approach of tailoring marketing strategies towards younger demographics. Housing prices might decline due to a decrease in birth rates coupled with a growing population of elderly individuals. As millennials move into the years when people often buy their first homes, usually their 30s and 40s, it is anticipated that the need for single-family homes will maintain high prices or potentially drive them up. By the time we approach the 2040s, there may be a stabilization or reduction in the demand for such housing, coinciding with a decline in the segment of the American population that is in their 30s. The preference among those in their 20s to rent apartments could indeed be undergoing a transformation. The need for services could potentially decrease throughout the decade of the 2020s. The challenges of a shrinking workforce and implications for Social Security. The retirement of baby boomers in the 2030s could lead to a shortfall in the workforce that may not be sufficiently compensated for by the smaller subsequent generations, such as Generation X and Millennials. This scenario has implications for numerous sectors, including the cultivation of a proficient workforce and the endurance of enterprises, and it may especially threaten the solidity of Social Security. By 2033, it is projected that retirees will only obtain 75% of the expected benefits from the Social Security program. Since the 1980s, Japan has been wrestling with these challenges, as its economy continues to strive for a complete rebound after experiencing a prolonged period of economic decline. The cohesion within our society is unraveling, impacting the potential for robust communal bonds. The increasing focus on individualism has led to a notable decrease in American involvement in local communities. As societal norms and traditional institutions, such as marriage and religion, become less influential, there could be a rise in the prevalence of social isolation, which may result in a greater number of individuals growing older without the advantage of strong family ties. Communal gatherings no longer revolve primarily around religious institutions. The decline in religious involvement began with the millennial generation and continued with Generation Z. Many individuals from the Millennial and Gen Z cohorts hold a belief in a higher power, although fewer among them engage in consistent religious worship. As more churches close, these institutions will no longer serve as physical gathering places where individuals form social connections, participate in time-honored traditions, and find support for life's challenges. Digital platforms, particularly those online, have emerged as significant venues for cultivating relationships. New generations are progressively turning to digital platforms to maintain relationships, using these online spaces to express their political opinions and keep connected with loved ones. Although these online environments may cultivate a sense of community, they are no substitute for the regular in-person interactions with others. Social media may potentially undermine the psychological health and the sense of connectedness within a community. Gen Twenge observes a notable hazard to mental health in the increasing tendency to participate in social exchanges through online platforms, which is exacerbated by the widespread adoption of social media. Social media platforms, by utilizing algorithms that reward controversial content, spread the idea that danger is abundant in our environment. The belief that a society centered on communal values is incompatible with the idea that individuals can enhance their circumstances, or with a sense of national pride that champions the preservation of the country's heritage. Navigating the challenges that arise from generational disparities will shape the future. The coming decades will challenge Americans across generations to find a way to coexist in an increasingly fragmented society, polarized in political beliefs, splintered geographically, and segregated by income inequalities. Technology plays a pivotal role in influencing modern trends, creating bonds among diverse generations, yet it also holds the capacity to guide these exchanges towards animosity and resentment. The way in which various generations engage with each other is molded by the impact of technological advancements, which differ in familiarity and use across age groups. Advancements in technology, particularly in the realm of digital media, have widened the divide between younger and older generations. It is often difficult for individuals from earlier times to fully understand the natural affinity Generation Z has for digital tools such as e-learning, virtual meetings, and the metaverse, sometimes failing to recognize that what was once seen as additional platforms like social media are now essential to those who came of age after 2010. Society might confront a sharper generational rift and heightened political instability within an already divided landscape. Twenge also notes the striking parallels, observing that the influential generations characterize both the 1960s and the 2020s. The inclination of Generation Z to be politically active and their potential to exceed the intense mix of activism seen in the 1960s is heightened by the digital revolution, which not only amplifies their grievances, but also expands their reach from conventional protests to digital spaces. It is essential for the nation's economic prosperity to foster comprehension and cooperation among the diverse generational perspectives. The advancement of the United States relies on the ability of people across various generations, with a range of political ideologies and financial backgrounds, to understand each other's perspectives and engage in meaningful dialogue. Looking forward, should the situation continue to be favorable, we might see sustained development and innovation, coupled with an increasing dedication to egalitarian ideals and potentially a more profound sense of togetherness fostered through a conscious emphasis on embracing diversity. Yet, if the country persists in pointing fingers and casting blame rather than striving for understanding, the result could be a disastrous collapse, a far cry from the hopeful prospects the silent generation saw in their early years during the post-war prosperity, and a sharp deviation from the promising futures imagined by millennials during their initial optimistic phase of life. Context. The impact of individualism on society is a complex topic that explores how the emphasis on personal freedom and self-expression influences various generations' behaviors and values. This trend can be seen in how different generations approach concepts like marriage, family dynamics, work ethics, and political beliefs. For example, shifts in attitudes towards marriage and delayed family planning reflect the prioritization of personal fulfillment over traditional societal expectations. Additionally, the evolution of political beliefs and the rise of movements like Black Lives Matter showcase how individualistic values shape societal perspectives and activism. The political landscape and generational divides in the text are influenced by factors like historical events, economic conditions, and societal changes. Different generations have unique experiences and perspectives shaped by the events and cultural shifts during their formative years. These experiences lead to varying political beliefs and values across generations, contributing to the observed divides. Understanding these generational differences requires considering the historical context and societal influences that have shaped each generation's worldview. The terms silent generation, baby boomers, Generation X, Millennials, and Generation Z are generational cohorts used to categorize people based on their birth years and shared experiences. The silent generation includes individuals born between the mid-1920s and early 1940s, who grew up during a period of economic hardship and post-World War II recovery. Baby boomers were born roughly between the mid-1940s and mid-1960s, characterized by a significant increase in birth rates following World War II. Generation X encompasses those born from the mid-1960s to the early 1980s, often associated with a pragmatic and independent mindset. Millennials, also known as Generation Y, were born from the early 1980s to the mid-1990s, marked by coming of age during the turn of the millennium. Generation Z includes individuals born from the mid-1990s to the early 2010s, known for growing up in a digital age and being socially conscious. The potential implications of changing generational attitudes on employment, economics, and social movements can manifest in various ways. For example, shifts in values towards work-life balance may lead to increased demand for flexible work arrangements. Economic trends could be influenced by generational preferences for certain industries or products. Social movements may gain momentum or evolve based on the priorities and activism of different generations. Shifts in birth rates can impact housing prices, as fewer births may lead to decreased demand for family homes in the future, potentially affecting the real estate market. Additionally, a declining workforce due to lower birth rates can strain programs like Social Security, as there may be fewer workers contributing to support retirees. These demographic changes can have long-term economic implications, influencing various sectors and social welfare programs. The interconnectedness of birth rates, housing markets, and social welfare systems underscores the importance of understanding demographic trends for planning and policymaking.